Perfect. Perfect.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome into Philly Take with RB. Today I have a special one lined up for you. I was able to get my guy Luca Rosano back on the show. Wanted to do this ever since Nick Nurse was hired. Just did not work out in terms of the scheduling until now. But what a better way to keep you entertained during the dead part of the NBA offseason. So I brought my guy Luca on, who does a great job covering the Raptors and the NBA. And we talked about Nick Nurse and why it will be a successful hire, the strengths, the weaknesses, really the inside perspective from somebody who has watched Nurse over the last several seasons, of course, and watched him help his team win a championship. So if you're watching this, I'm probably away on a vacation right now, but I hope you enjoy the show. And before we get right into it, shout out to our partner of today's video. Shout out to the partner of today's video, Mint Mobile. If you out there are similar to everyone else in the world who has thought to themselves at one point, why is my wireless bill so high? Then Mint Mobile is for you. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 per month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network and keep costs low because they sell directly to you online, cutting out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? You can go and use that money to treat yourself to a Sixers game or even buy a new jersey. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text plus lightning fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. They even offer super affordable family plans with as little as 2 lines. And switching to Mint is super easy thanks to their digital eSIM cards. You can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will actually ship you a new SIM card free of charge. The whole process will only take about 15 minutes. And if you get stuck, Mint has a great customer service team to help you through it. So if you are interested in reliable coverage and fast data for a fraction of the cost, go to mintmobile.com/PhillyTake. You can go right down to the description of this video and click the link, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. Man, we have a special guest today. It's been a while. It's been a while since we linked up. The last time Sixers and Raps were playing each other in the playoffs, and now it's just so funny that the former coach of the Raptors is now the coach of the Sixers. And what a perfect time to bring in our guy, Luca Rosano. Luca, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, RB. Thanks for having me. And I just want to clear the air because, the last time we did something together, you had won the bet because you said the Sixers were going to win the first round playoff series, as they did. I thought it was going to be a sweep, but obviously the Raptors did make it somewhat competitive. And because I lost that bet, I was supposed to wear a Ben Simmons jersey. However, I'm in Toronto, RB's in Philly, and something happened with the whole shipment of it. So I never got that jersey. It's no one's fault, but RB is the true winner of that bet. So I gotta publicly say congrats, even though we're a year removed from that.
You guys made it a competitive series, but yeah, let's hit on that real quick. So, let's just call it how it is, man. UPS, the guy was just very frustrated. I don't know what happened, man. The guy that was working at the actual store was nice. Like, he watched the show, he knew about it, but the actual manager was just so pissed off and frustrated. I never had an experience like that. And like you said, for the record, because people were throwing shade at you in the comments. I don't know if you knew, but they were saying, man, this guy's not wearing the jersey. He's a fraud, etc. We literally tried every avenue to get this jersey to Canada. And on top of the actual shipping price, which they told me beforehand, they tried to charge me an extra $100 for no reason, out of nowhere. And then the guy got frustrated and wouldn't refund it. So it was a whole process, but I will back up Luca on that. He did indeed try, but now we're going to have to get you out to a game in Philly wearing the Ben Simmons jersey. I still have it. It's still for you, man.
Yeah, listen, I'm a man of my word. I lost the bet, and maybe we got to do that. Maybe I got to visit RB in Philly. We're going to go to a Sixers game, and I shamelessly have to wear the Ben Simmons jersey. Not only will I feel bad about it, but I'll probably get booed out of the building wearing that jersey at this point.
Oh, I love it, man. Yeah, let's definitely hit on that idea. But welcome on in, man. It's been a while. If I'm not mistaken, you just got back from NBA Summer League. So yeah, tell us how that went. How was that experience?
Yeah, it was awesome, man. It was my first NBA Summer League experience. I went with some of the guys from Lakers Nation. The Raptors were playing that day as well. And yeah, it was just awesome just seeing the different games going on. There was the main court where the main games were happening. And there was like another court that was still in the same building. And it was more like high school vibes. Like just, picture you're watching a game like like at high school, and just like that, those intimate vibes were like, yeah, everybody's watching it. The players are so close. And I was able to catch the Raptors game. They didn't win the game that I watched. They actually played very horribly. And then I also saw the Lakers game as well. They won that game. And then I just saw some other games like the Rockets, who were just phenomenal, obviously with Cam Whitmore and company. But yeah, it was really cool. And I feel like my main takeaway was like NBA Summer League is like that one time in the year where like everybody comes together, because as you know, like during the NBA season, like it's crazy busy. But then middle of July or early July, everybody kind of takes it off. They go to Summer League, and that's like everybody's opportunity to connect. Guys were seeing each other that they hadn't seen in years. You see players, different media members, and it was just cool from that experience. Not only seeing like so many players in the lobby, getting to talk to somebody, some of them, but also just like connecting with like fellow journalists, content creators. That part of it was really, really cool as well. So yeah, I would definitely vouch for NBA Summer League if you ever have the chance to go.
Oh yeah, definitely. I want to get out there. That sounds fantastic. It would be a really fun idea, especially with content as well. But speaking of content, the Sixers are keeping us up to date with all of this stuff going on with James Harden, but something happened before that, we never got to connect on, just a little bit of a schedule conflict, but I'm glad we finally get to do it now. The former Raptors coach, and last time we collabed, Nick Nurse was your guy and obviously helped the Raptors win a championship. And how crazy is it that he is now, the head coach of the Sixers? He's now in charge of this organization. I want to take a step back. What was your initial reaction, your main thoughts when Nick Nurse got fired? I know there was kind of some tension, at least from what I heard on the outside point of view at the end of the season, but what was your main takeaway when he got fired? Like, did he actually deserve that?
So I know a lot of people ended up turning on Nick Nurse, but I was one of those guys that I had nothing against Nick Nurse. Like when I look at his body of work here with the Raptors, I understand what he did. He was a huge architect behind the Raptors championship in 2019. And the reality is Nurse went 227 and 163, and that ranks as the winningest coach in Raptors history. So Nick Nurse did what he needed to do. I think it was just one of those things that both sides needed to change. I think Nick Nurse needed a new team to go to, a new project, if you will, to work on. And the Raptors had outgrown Nurse. And I think a lot of the players and Nurse they went their separate ways. So I don't think it's anything that Nurse did wrong, because you look at those Raptors teams, when they were healthy, Nick Nurse always had them in competitive situations. Yes, there were many questionable things over the years, but all in all, he had a very successful tenure. I mean, he's right now the greatest coach in Raptors history. So I understood why it happened, just because, like I said, both sides grew apart, especially with management growing apart from Nurse and Nurse kind of losing the locker room towards the end of the season. As you know, as much as me, the Raptors did not fare to anybody's expectations last season. That was a very, very forgettable season. So yeah, it sucked to see him go, just because he meant so much to the Raptors' success, helping us win that championship in 2019. But at the same time, yeah, I have nothing against Nurse, and I did think he was going to go to a team that was closer to a championship. My original guess and prediction was the Milwaukee Bucks. As you recall, that was a very big rumor going around that he would go to the Bucks. Obviously, the Bucks got Griffin instead, and Nick Nurse went to Philadelphia. So when I heard the news, I thought right away that it was a great fit. And I'm sure a lot of Philly fans were excited about it as well, because Nick Nurse, I believe, could be that guy that potentially gets Philly over the top in the playoffs. So I know we'll get into a little bit more, but yeah, my initial reaction to it was just I kind of saw it coming from the Raptors side of it. And then once I heard that he was going to Philly, it just made all the sense in the world to me.
Yeah, to me, it kind of feels like it just ran its course in Toronto. But like you said, a great winning percentage. He seems like a very smart, detail-oriented guy just from listening to some of his interviews. But at the end of the day, I mean, Nick Nurse, let's be honest, was a slam dunk hire. You look at the guys that were out there, he was probably on the top of my list. And yeah, I'm happy that the Sixers got him. But, you go back, you look, right? He comes into Toronto, he wins a championship, and everybody wants to kind of pin this to, it's Kawhi Leonard, right? Kawhi was there, and then Kawhi left. And then I feel like people don't remember the next season. He came back and still had the Raptors as a top seed. I know they went to the bubble and all that happened. But he did a really damn good coaching job. And I think over the years, in my personal opinion, I would love to hear from you on this, but it didn't really feel like they ever had a championship team since Kawhi left. Like he had the top guy, and Kawhi left after that season, and they never got back to the peak. But to me, it's like, this is a star-driven league. You have to have those guys. And I still think he did a pretty damn good job. Obviously, again, it kind of boiled over this last year, but, when he has been given the talent, he has produced. So is that fair to say?
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, and one that I was going to mention. That following year, nobody was expecting the Raptors to still be at the top of the East. A lot of people thought they were just going to fall to the basement. And what did Nick Nurse do? He helped that team be in prime position, and he won Coach of the Year. Like, he had those guys ready to go, even without their best player in Kawhi Leonard, who had left to the Clippers. He got the most out of that bunch, and I think that's what Philly fans should look forward to, because not only is he going to help elevate Joel Embiid, especially in the postseason, similar to how he helped Kawhi Leonard during that playoff run, but he's going to get the most out of the other guys, the supporting cast. And I think Nick Nurse deserves a lot of the credit as well, because something that wasn't a strong suit of Doc Rivers' coaching ability is something that I think Nick Nurse does a great job. And that's, he's an X's and O's guy. He's an in-game adjustment guy. And when the game's at its peak, when the game's at its most important stages, Nick Nurse isn't afraid of making changes that he thinks is going to work. And I think, having Nurse there is going to do very well for Philly, because I know there are a lot of times, especially in the postseason, where Philly fans are like, what's going on? Like, how is Doc not making adjustments when clearly they were right in front of your eyes? So I think Nick Nurse, like, I know there was a bit of flack that he wasn't one to give the younger guys on the Raptors team chances, but I think that speaks more about his no BS demeanor. Like, if you're going to play hard, if you're going to show Nurse that you want to be out there, you're going to grind out minutes, you're going to grind on defense, he's going to give you the opportunities. And I think that no BS demeanor is really going to help this Philly team that at times people question their integrity, the team's, physicality, the team's softness level. And I think Nick Nurse is really going to help Philly in that regard, because Nick Nurse, I mean, his track record speaks for itself. This isn't a guy that Philly's taking a chance on. No, like he's been there. He's done that. He's proven it. And it wasn't just a 1 year 2019 championship season that people can say it was a fluke. No, go back and, watch the seasons following that. Like I said, when the Raptors were healthy, Nick Nurse had that team competitive. And unfortunately, things just ran its course, like you said, and everything just blew up this past season and fell apart for this team.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I really like, when I look at Nick Nurse, even the fact that he coached a couple summer league games and was already making adjustments. I mean, these are guys just trying to scratch a roster spot, and, he's out there making adjustments, getting acclimated with some of the young guys. It really speaks volumes. Like you said, Doc Rivers was never the type to do that. The Sixers have really needed a coach that can adjust, and they just have not had one. And to me, again, it feels like the guy that you bring in to finally help this team get over the top. Obviously, they're dealing with roster stuff right now, but, this was a slam dunk hire in my opinion. And I want to go back, though, to the point you made about, it kind of like boiling over and losing the locker room in a sense, because there's a whole narrative out there. And if I'm being honest, I've heard things on both sides of the spectrum. So that's where I come to my Raptors guy and I say, what really happened this past season? Because you heard some things from players, and then you heard, Nick Nurse. There was like a story where one night he just reamed through everybody, and I kind of don't know what to believe at this point. I've heard everything. I like the accountability. I like that he can command respect from players, and like you said, it's something that the Sixers team needs. But what really happened with the Toronto Raptors? Even when Nick Nurse got hired, it feels like the only guy to congratulate him was Fred VanVleet. Was there actually a problem with some of the players and Nick Nurse? Or like you said, was it just, it just ran its time and they're going in a different direction? Or was his personality ever conflicting with the team itself?
Like, there were times where, you saw players visibly unhappy, and Nick Nurse's demeanor didn't look like the old Nick Nurse demeanor. And I mean, one example of it was like Gary Trent Jr. This was a guy who, was getting many minutes, starters minutes, and then all of a sudden, he was coming from off the bench. So I know there was a little drift there. Some of the younger guys on this team, there was a lot of like frustration and confusion. Like guys like Malachi Flynn, Delano Banton, who's now a Boston Celtic, how come those guys weren't getting as much run as they should? I don't think there was like a situation or something that like happened in the locker room that was like the breaking point. I think it's more so what we've touched on. And yeah, just both sides ran its course. And I think it was beyond Nick Nurse. It was just the players were just became a non-good fit with the Raptors. Like we saw, like, there were questions about like, could Van Vliet stay on this team? There's Scotty Barnes now who you should be prioritizing. Is OG truly happy that he's not necessarily getting as many touches as he wants? Because now there's Scotty, you got to prioritize. There's still Siakam, and there was obviously Fred, etc. So I think, my biggest thing with the Raptors is it was just the personnel more so than anything, because you can blame Nick Nurse all you want, but I don't think the personnel was as good as it should have been. And then you got to start looking at the higher ups for making those changes and constructing the roster as they did. So it was more of the roster construction than it was Nick Nurse, in my opinion, of why it ultimately did not end well. And then another big point was, when you've been accustomed to somebody for so long and all of a sudden things aren't going as smoothly as they once were, sometimes, things can drift away, and people need a fresh start. People need change. And I think that was the breaking point this season of just, everything had to run its course, and Nick Nurse needed change, and this Raptors organization needed change, and they needed to go with a guy who did prioritize player development a lot more than Nurse did. And like, that's a guy like Ryakovich, which I'm super happy with that hiring, because I think the Raptors should go into a rebuild era. I've said this many times on my channel, where they do build around Barnes, and having a guy like that makes more sense. Whereas I picture Nurse as being that guy who can help a team potentially get over the top and win a championship. And like I said at the top here, the Sixers are closer to that right now than the Raptors are.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, when Nurse has coached a star, I mean, you see the product, you see the result. But I want to hit on that point about player development, because obviously that's been a huge red flag with the Sixers. And, we have all these different young guys, Jaden Springers. We had the Isaiah Joes of the world, the Bassies, and, now we have a couple guys in Summer League that people like. Doc Rivers never gave any of these guys opportunity. And from researching and listening to what others have said, the one knock on Nick Nurse, as you just touched on, is that, he doesn't let the young players develop. However, when I go back and personally think, I think about the development of Siakam, Van Vliet, Anunoby. Are these all just natural progressions in the guy's career, or does Nick Nurse get any credit for how some of these players developed into, their star roles and, earn big contracts? Does Nick Nurse have any part in that? Or do you think this is going to be a recurring issue even now with Philadelphia? Because I'll tell you, the last thing Sixer fans want right now is a coach who comes in and is not going to give any of the young guys any minutes. That is literally the opposite of what they need, given that Doc Rivers never prioritized it.
And that's the interesting part of it. And I'm genuinely interested to see how Nurse will handle that, because that was the knock on him towards the end of his Raptors tenure. And the joke I know that was made out of the gate about Nurse going to Philly was like, okay, Joel Embiid's going to be playing like 45 minutes in the playoffs. Like, he's just going to grind the starters to the ground. And if you remember, like a couple of seasons ago, or even like this past season before that, like the Raptors starters had logged the most minutes in the league. Like there were like 2-3 guys who were just logging major minutes. And I know there was like knocks on that and things of that nature. I would say this, like it goes back to, Nick Nurse just being a very like straight up guy. He doesn't take any, BS stuff like that. I think, he's going to give the Sixers younger guys opportunities, and it's going to be up to them if they want to, make the most out of it. Nick Nurse prioritizes guys that take defense seriously. And that was one of the things with Flynn, that, he had this promise, but he wasn't necessarily the best defender or a guy who you can count on defensively. So if guys are committing and they're giving it their all with the minutes that they do get, and they're really showing a lot defensively, I think Nick Nurse will, allow them to do a lot more. It's just going to come down to gaining Nick Nurse's trust. And once you break that barrier and you do gain his trust, then you can see these players really develop. Because like you said, like it wasn't just the Kawhi Leonard show when the Raptors won the championship. We saw the merge, of Siakam taking his game to the next level. Fred VanVleet, that was kind of his breakout of like, oh, who is this undrafted guy? And then obviously he went on to make the All-Star team in seasons after that. So I think, when you look at guys on this team like Maxey, like it will be intriguing because I do think that, Nick Nurse will not only help Joel Embiid, but he's going to help the supporting cast. And we'll see if those younger guys, in fact, get minutes, because like that's something that like I can't emphatically say they will. And like I said, I'm interested to see if Nurse will not make the same mistake again and really just give everybody a fair chance. But like I said, I think if you earn Nick Nurse's trust, you'll see the leash get a little bit longer than it was.
Absolutely. And I'm definitely excited about the defensive side of the ball. It's something that the Sixers have always just played lackadaisical on. And, I don't feel like they've ever had a coach to really like put that into motion. Like, okay, you have to do this on a nightly basis. Sometimes they get lazy rebounding. They should be a lot better than they are, which, even makes me think about a guy like Tobias Harris. We know he's overpaid. We know there's been a lot of trade rumors, but maybe Nurse could kind of elevate his game, etc. The one player from listening to you talk that I know will not fit in Nurse's system is James Harden. And he, seems to be on his way out anyway, so it really doesn't matter. But, the being able to switch on defense and like you said, earning that trust, to me, it feels like they kind of just had a meeting and Harden probably said, yeah, this isn't for me. This isn't my cup of tea. Because again, like you said, Nurse is not afraid to get in his guy's face. So I'm excited to see what, Nick Nurse can do, especially now with another star. I don't feel like he's had like the prominent type of player, since a Kawhi Leonard, and now he has Joel Embiid. It'll be interesting to see as well, because Nurse has talked about ball movement a lot. And I'm wondering, whether Embiid will, not really be in the same position every time down the floor, or if the ball will be moving more. And Sixer fans have been asking for Tyrese Maxey to get more volume of touches. So I hope he kind of implements that system, not too much, but just getting other guys involved and not really having such a predictable offense as Nurse said in his last interview.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, and it's going to be interesting. Obviously, that pairing with Nurse and Embiid, obviously they've gone from rivals to now being on the same team, and I think that's another big point, defense, because when you look at some of those Raptors teams, the championship season, the season after that, like they were one of the better defensive teams, and when Nurse was getting those guys playing, like they were playing, like they were locked in. Everybody knew their assignment. And, people are going to say, oh, the Raptors overachieved. No, I think that was just, everybody knowing their role, collectively coming together. And again, Nurse not taking anybody's, BS and telling these guys, listen, like you got to commit. And it always started on the defensive end. And that just opened everything up. So I think a Sixers team is really going to value from that, especially in the postseason, because we saw many times like they look great at times in the postseason, but then they had their downfalls and like their hiccups and times where you're just shaking your head as a Sixers fan, saying to yourself, like, what are we watching right now? And like that was actually a point I was going to make. Like a lot of it's going to fall on Nurse, but a lot of it's going to be the roster of this team. And like what I'm interested to see is what's going to happen with James Harden, because I don't think that's going to be something that's going to benefit the Sixers at all if he's back, because, having James in the locker room, like you said, like he probably already like thought to himself, yeah, this ain't going to work. And maybe that's the reason why he wants out of Philly. But I think it would be best, in my personal opinion, like Philly just does whatever they can to just kind of like see past this whole Harden thing, because like, I don't know how you feel about this, but yeah, Harden being back at this point, I think would be more harm than good. Obviously it's going to come down to a return, but yeah, like a player like of Harden's pedigree, I don't think would match well at all in like a Nick Nurse run offense and defense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't think the plan is to have James Harden long term. I think, what happened is, he went out and tried to view the market, and there was really no value for him based on his injury history, his production, and especially how the Sixers ended in the playoffs. I do think Daryl Morey's not afraid to enter a scratchy situation. I don't think he's going to just move him for anything. I think he wants a star, but ultimately, like you said, you have to come down to reality. There's just not much out there. And I do not want a disgruntled James Harden in the Sixers locker room. I don't think Nick Nurse would really tolerate that either. So I'm interested to see what's next there. What is one thing that Sixer fans might not know about Nick Nurse, or just one thing you find very intriguing about either him or his coaching style that kind of goes under the radar, would you say?
Yeah, I just think, he's a very smart guy. And I think, a lot of people don't realize like how much Nick Nurse knows the game at a high level. Like he's been in coaching.
He's won at multiple levels too.
For a long time. He's won at multiple levels. He made it to the top of the mountain. And just like when you look at Nurse, you guys are going to see like he just does a great job of like, devising effective game plans. And he's a very situational guy. So like, going into each matchup is going to be different. He's going to neutralize the other team's best player, making those critical adjustments that Sixers fans have been raving on and on for Doc to make over the years. And just, making adjustments and not being afraid to make adjustments in high pressure situations. I think that's what Nick Nurse's calling card is. Like at times you might be questioning what the guy does, but you just got to trust his high basketball IQ. Like he's a very smart dude. He knows how to win. He knows what needs to be done. And I think he's just, excellent in that regard. So yeah, don't underestimate what Nick Nurse can do with the Sixers team. And I think, he does have the right personnel there. We'll see how the whole James Harden saga ends, but there's going to be a good enough amount of talent for, Philadelphia to compete in the East with Nick Nurse leading the way. And I'm very interested to see, like you said, like how is Joel Embiid going to benefit from this? Because we saw how Nick Nurse just made it all work with Kawhi. And, that went better than expected. And, he
changed the culture. He kind of changed the culture.
Yeah, he changed the culture. And like, I'm trying to think back. Like there was a clip too, where like, Nick Nurse, they lost the first game of that playoff run against the Magic. And then from then on out, like they were just all locked in. He got that team ready to go. And the Raptors really, after dropping game one against the Magic, they didn't miss a beat the rest of the way. Obviously they took down the Magic. They took down the 76ers and they went on to win the championship. So yeah, he's going to change the culture for all the good reasons. And I think that's what Philadelphia needed the most. Like Doc had run its course. It just wasn't working. I know Sixers fans were calling for Doc to be fired for so many seasons. This season was the breaking point. And I think Nick Nurse now is going to potentially be that guy that can, lead you guys over the top. Because like you need that guy who's going to change the culture and get you over that proverbial hill. And I think Nick Nurse, being the basketball mastermind that he is gonna help in that regard.
Well, you're speaking what I like to hear, man. All good stuff. The last thing I wanted to touch on was the Pascal Siakam thing. Lucky enough, there was a rumor, I guess, as of late from Matt Moore at the Action Network where he had mentioned several teams that could be interested in Pascal Siakam. Personally, I'll tell you straight up, I don't think there's any way he would ever get traded to the Sixers for sure. I don't think he wants to, pair back up with Nick Nurse. I don't know your thoughts on that. And I've heard their relationship's a bit rocky, but I don't even think Siakam will get moved in general. It seems that Masai Ujiri loves holding on to these guys till the very end, even if they don't really warrant a return. Like sometimes they just end up walking. And I just don't, see a way. Maybe next year if Siakam walks in free agency, but I don't see any way they end up trading him. What's your thoughts on that situation?
I mean, I could just get into this right now. I will quickly. I do think the Raptors should trade Siakam this summer. I know there's the interesting thing about how Siakam won't sign an extension because he does want to be with the Raptors and wants that extension with the Raptors. But at the same time, do the Raptors really want to run the risk of, losing Siakam for nothing, just out as they lost Fred for nothing? But I wouldn't be surprised if Siakam doesn't get moved, just because I know the Raptors are very patient in terms of, making things happen, as we've seen in the past. And they're going to want a huge haul in return for Siakam. And then that leads me to say, I just don't see any sense in a potential deal with the Sixers, because you're talking about matching salaries, and the biggest salaries that the Sixers have, like Tobias Harris, James Harden. These are veterans that wouldn't make sense for the Raptors.
It would have to be a 3-team deal.
Since the Raptors got to go younger. Like if the Raptors are going to trade Siakam, you want young players and assets. So getting a Tobias Harris back in return or James Harden just doesn't make any sense. I mean, so I don't see a Sixers Raptors trade going down for that. I know Siakam has been rumored to go to a lot of places. There is a lot of interest. But I think like a team like the Hawks, if they were to put together like an intriguing package, Indiana, some of these teams that do have like an intriguing young piece, like, a Matherin, and then you put picks around that, will that be enough? But yeah, in terms of like the whole Sixers rumor, I don't think that makes sense for both sides.
Yeah, no, I think what's going to happen is he'll probably get held on, and maybe, closer to the deadline, maybe there's a team who's really willing to pay a steep price, go over the top, and get a guy like Siakam who has won and can do a lot of different things on the floor. So that's kind of how I see it. But I will say it's a very interesting offseason for the two of our teams here. The Sixers obviously in a much different situation, but the Raptors, they have a lot of talent. And I will say, I hated Nick Nurse. I remember when we talked about him before, but I'm very glad to have him on this side now. It's, you hate playing against him, but when he's with your staff, you love him. And I do hope he makes, some great adjustments. And I don't know. I think that first battle, back in Canada is going to be an interesting one. I mean, they're obviously going to give him an ovation, but who knows, man? You leave it all out on the floor.
Yeah, and I love the subplots too, right? Like Raptors, Sixers rivalry just heightened. There's going to be a lot of animosity now. Yeah, Nick Nurse going up against his old team. Like I said before, Joel Embiid and Nick Nurse, there was like iconic moments where they got heated with one another. Now they're going to have to be on the same page. So I think it's going to make the battles much more interesting. But yeah, I think, Raptors fans just got to give credit where credit's due. Like Nick Nurse, he came here, ultimately did his job. He did a really good job. And listen, I have nothing against Nurse. I hope he succeeds in the next chapter of his coaching career. And I think he will do a good job with Philadelphia. So, when I heard the news of Nurse going to Philly, I knew Philly had a really good coach coming their way, especially with the coaching options that were out there. Nick Nurse was probably the best one. So Philadelphia definitely won in that category. So
Absolutely.
You'll see, RB. I mean, we'll see. Middle of the season, you'll either be, ripping your hair out saying, what the hell is Nick Nurse doing? Or you'll be like, yo, we might actually be on to something special here.
Yeah, hope it's the second one, man. But well said. And as always, man, appreciate you coming on. We definitely have to do this again later in the season, kind of get an update on the situation. But yeah, man, let the people know where to find you. Continue to keep killing it in the content game.
Yeah, you can just, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Luca Rosano. I'm still covering the Raptors, but I've also been doing other NBA stuff as well. I did some pieces on the Sixers during the season. So yeah, for all NBA content and Raptor stuff, definitely go check out my YouTube channel. And then, for more NBA content, my TikTok as well. That's just Luca.Rosano. And then, of course, on Twitter, you can find me, Luca Rosano 3 for any in-game stuff and breaking news and things of that nature. But yeah, I just want to say in closing here, man, thanks for having me on, RB. You're the man. And I know we have, our moments, our teams, our bitter rivals at times, but I definitely respect you, your work, and the Sixers fandom. You guys definitely show up every single time. So thanks for having me.
Appreciate that, man. Yeah, we'll get you out here to a game soon in Sixers, Raptors, Wells Fargo Center, and you'll get to see your boy Nick Nurse, man. And you'll have to wear the Simmons jersey, but we'll make it happen.
Let's do it.